Meet Dr. Lois Lee. When she found 11-year-olds working as prostitutes in Hollywood, she took them home. She built the first drop-in center, ran street programs across the West, and created a world-class home for kids nationwide. Dr. Lois Lee didn't just start a movement, she's rescued over 17,000 kids from sex trafficking. Now she's pulling back the curtain so you can meet the kids who changed her life and hear the truths no one else will tell. Welcome to the Dr. Lois Lee Show.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Lois Lee, founder and president of Children of the Night. And today I have Teri Weigel with me, a Beverly Hills publicist who we met just a few years ago over our common involvement with the Hillside Strangler investigation. Teri lived next door to Kenneth Bianchi, who was one of the Hillside Stranglers. And so I'm going to let Teri really tell the story. Hi, Teri. Do you want to talk about what you're doing now?
Hi, Lois. It's wonderful to see you. It's been a while. I am still a publicist and I work in entertainment and I have a few clients. I've narrowed it down so I could slow down, so I could do some writing. And my writing is of my experience in Hollywood, growing up in Hollywood, on the streets of Hollywood, basically, and going to Hollywood High and dealing with pimps and hookers, or prostitutes, I should say, or sex workers, and dealing with living next door to Kenneth Bianchi and the killing of the 11th victim in that building and all the fallout that came after.
Okay, so tell us what it was like living next door to him. What was that like?
What happened was my parents were the building managers and they lived there rent-free because I suppose they were, maybe covering some things that were going on in the building. I'm not quite sure. So I was 16 going to Hollywood High and I was so depressed. And every night, as I'm sure you've heard from some of the tenants in the newspapers, there was a lot of screaming and women being beaten in this building, Tamarind Terrace. And I had to wear headphones to go to sleep at night. I couldn't deal with it. And I asked my father, why is there always all this screaming? And he said to just ignore it. Well, because of that and the strain on my parents' relationship, he was an alcoholic and we had no money. And my mother was having a nervous breakdown. And I had to keep going to school, Hollywood High, and eventually I just started fading and I was so depressed. And I just stopped talking because I just gave up. And I overheard friends in the locker room at Hollywood High saying how strange I was for not speaking anymore. And that shocked me and horrified me. And I was actually very angry that I had let it go this far and that my parents had let it go this far and that all the adults in my life had let it go this far, that no one saw me. And I realized in that moment I wasn't invisible. I was visible. So I went home to my mother that day at 16 and said, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've stopped talking. And if I'm leaving, I don't care where I go. I don't care where I end up or what happens to me. All I know is I can't stay here. I can't deal with the pimps and the hookers and the beatings and all this stuff here. I can't deal with you and Dad. And I probably would have ended up on Hollywood Boulevard and I hopefully would have met you. If God was looking out for me. But instead, because my parents were managers, my mother put me in my own apartment at the other end of the building, away from all the activity with beatings and such. And so I was in my own apartment at 16. And then around August 9th, I took an elevator ride with my mother and Kenneth Bianchi and his so-called fiance. They were moving next door to me. We were going to share walls. And It was at the end of the building where there was no one else. And I thought, why does my mother have to put him right next door to me? I don't know who this guy is. But he said he was a security guard, so she thought it would help me, keep me safe. But as he moved in and as time went on, I would hear him yelling and beating. What was her name? Kelly Boyd was his fiance, and she was pregnant. And my dad, in his wisdom, with my apartment, put up a Radio Shack door alarm. And so when he was beating her, when Kenneth Bianchi was beating Kelly Boyd, I would set my alarm off to stop it, and he would stop. And to me, this was just normal because I'd been living like this anyway.
This is a story that hasn't been told because the police always thought the story was about them.
My mother had shown the apartment, Tamarind Terrace, 114, to a man, and which she believes now, which we assume is Kenneth's cousin.
Angleo Buono.
Correct. And he might have left a door unlocked because later that night, Angelo and Kenneth came back, and Kenneth had summoned Kimberly Martin.
Yes.
Yeah, she was the 11th victim, and she was summoned to this empty apartment. And the next day she was found. And
she was Hillside Strangler victim number 10 or 11. Let's go back in terms of how we actually met, because we didn't meet at that time. You reached out to me.
Yeah, it was after COVID and during COVID. Everybody was watching true crime documentaries and a lot of serial killers. And I started watching the ones on the Hillside Strangler, and you were in all of them. And I liked how you held yourself and everything you said, and you're very pragmatic and very passionate and very compelling. And I found a podcast with Joe
Redondo.
He has a podcast called Hillside. You were on that, and you were telling him about trick pads. And the police there were asking, "Who are you?" And you said, "Well, I'm Lois Lee." And you had been trying so hard to get them, that night to find her and come to this apartment building, and they just didn't have any desire to do so, I suppose.
I had made all those phone calls to the police and tried to get LAPD to respond. They wouldn't respond. So I called Warren Wilson at KMBC, and I said at 3:00 in the morning, "Get up, we got another one." He went and got a camera crew, went out to the apartment building. He couldn't get in. It was a security building. Her car was in front. Her keys were in the middle of the street. And he said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm not coming out. I'm going to stay here and wait for the police." So the next morning, he went to the apartment building, and there were cops all over the place because they were responding to the call the night before. And Bob Grogan said, "You're going to tell me everything." I said, "You should have been there last night." And he said, "Well, I wish I would have." And I said, "Well, I wish you would have too," because he was part of the Hillside Strangulation Task Force. Why they were off, I don't know. Why they didn't respond, I don't know. It was total incompetence. And the fact that Bianchi was smarter than them to be able to not provide his driver's license. If they would have insisted on seeing his driver's license, they would have found the address on his driver's license was the same address as the previous victim. And if they'd checked the DMV records, they would have found that all of his previous addresses matched the location of the previous victims. So they missed it again for the second time. We have a video of me making that phone call. Let's go to that video for a moment.
At 9 o'clock last night, the killer made the call from this telephone in the Hollywood Public Library. He waited at this telephone for from 15 to 20 minutes for the out-call service to call him back to verify that that's where he was. The victim then called him at this telephone, and she was directed to this apartment building not far from the library. Her car was found parked across the street. She went to apartment 114, which the manager said has been vacant since last August. When she failed to telephone the service that she had arrived, they became suspicious and called an organization known as California Association for Trollops.
I called the operator to verify that it was, yes, in fact, a payphone, and called several different law enforcement offices to find out if this address existed or where it existed. And in the meantime, the girlfriend's friend went over to the girl's house that had left to meet the man, and found a piece of paper where she'd written the address that the girl had given her originally, and then the man had changed the address. And so we had a different address, and we sent a pimp over because I kept calling LAPD, and this started at 10 o'clock, and they kept referring me to a different office, to the Strangulation Task Force, that they couldn't do anything. They had to wait 2 hours. Then what happened was a pimp went over there, and he found that her car was in front of this address, and he worked his way. He got into the security building. Someone buzzed him in, and he went up to the apartment to find that it was open and that there was no electricity, and there was just an unmade bed, mattress.
And you attempted to reach police as early as 10 o'clock or so?
I've got numbers of 6 or 7 different LAPD numbers where I was referred, and they refused to send a car out, and they kept shifting me from one area to another. And finally, someone called from the task force and told me to come down to the sheriff's office and fill out the report here, but they couldn't go out because it was LAPD's jurisdiction. And it was an emergency situation. But we also have the instance in terms of, there were jokes made on the phone, such as I said, look, this was a prostitute, and I understand this stigma, and I understand this discrimination. They said, oh, those prostitutes are flakes. And, we know where she tricks out of, and da-da-da-da, and she's not going to... But it was like it wasn't taken seriously.
Somebody said that to you last night when you were trying to report this woman?
It was said several times to me, on the phone, and questions that their primary concern is, how did you get involved in doing all this? How did you pick out this line of work? There was no concern at all about sending a car out to the location when something they potentially could have checked that phone booth right then and there, and to check the people where the phone call was made to see if anyone had seen this man. Or they could have gone to the location and found it right away that she was gone.
Her body was found about 6 hours after Miss Lee first attempted to report the woman missing. She had been dumped over the side of a mountain in the Elysian Hills section of the Silver Lake area. The nude body was almost in the backyard of some residents in the area, and only about 2 miles from where the 10th victim was found about 15 days ago. This morning, Ms. Lee was finally told to file a missing persons report when the sheriff came out and said it would not be necessary.
LAPD did take a telephonic report of the missing person, and the missing person that you reported, Donna Wright, is the person that they have found dead on North Alvarado Street at 6:30 this morning. We're not going to take a report from you now because it's superfluous. We don't have a missing person. She's been positively identified.
Hookers believe the man has settled on prostitutes because they are such easy prey. A police psychologist is developing a psychological profile of a man he believes to be a psychopath, a man who has a compulsion to kill, but who at the same time wants to be caught. And he says he will probably become more careless with each succeeding victim. From the Elysian Hills, Warren Wilson, News Center 4.
And then I was trying to tell the police that the landlords, the managers, your parents, knew exactly who was in that apartment last night because it was an empty apartment. They didn't use Kenneth Bianchi's apartment. And that must have been the apartment that Angleo Buono was looking at and, as you say, probably left a window unlatched. I was trying to explain that, they use these as trick pads and that managers, oftentimes charge cash and let people use them to take prostitutes there, but they didn't want to hear any of that.
Well, I'm not sure. I don't know if my parents were getting cash. They may have. I don't know. They're deep, dark secrets. They lived there for free, rent free. So that could have been the deal. My parents were so emotionally, I don't know how to explain it, but they were just a mess. And so when this happened, when my mother showed the apartment, I assume she just thought it was a potential renter. And then because she had gotten a call that night from a woman near that apartment saying there's a woman in that empty apartment screaming, saying, please don't kill me. And so my mother had gone down to the hall and they heard it. And there was a lot of scuffling, I suppose. I'm not sure the events that happened, but part of me says my mother saw them taking her, but not realizing it was Kenneth. And then they had taken Kimberly Martin down to the garage in his Cadillac, which apparently they had murdered her in.
They took her off the premises. You'd mentioned before to me that your mom said that when they were taking her out of the building, she was still alive. Do you remember that?
Yes, yes. She was struggling, yes. And there was such a commotion going on. I guess one of the tenants looked through the sliding glass doors and saw a man and woman struggling. Now, but see, this was an ongoing thing in this building. It was the norm.
Do you have a key to that apartment, or had you left the window open or something?
Angela and I walked into the apartment from the hallway and left by the sliding door. She started to head out the door, and Angela pulled her back and threw her down, and it seems like it happened so fast. Angela closed the door, and just was silence because there were people in the hallway by then.
Right. Now, how were you able to get her to stay quiet between the apartment and the car and the garage?
Angela told her if she said anything, he'd kill her.
And I was doing my laundry that night down there in the garage. And, I don't know. It's just, I avoided somehow making connections.
Did you leave the apartment building after that event? Or did you continue to live there?
I continued to live there. It's rather foggy. I think after my parents left, when the police showed up, my mother, on top of her nervous breakdown, had to deal with press and LAPD. And my father had just returned from actually leaving my mother. So that was a roller coaster for her. So that tells you where her nerves were.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of this, and they decided, after being told by a female police officer, if I were you, I would change my name and leave town. You don't want to mess with the LAPD, the Hillside Strangler, or the owners of this building. And so my parents did. And you know what happened. And
Right.
my parents left, and they did change their name. And I believe it was the detective, Bob, who would come to where I was working. Strangely, even in high school, I was working. And he would show me mugshots. And he would come in it periodically. And he would say, I have to talk to your mother. And I said, I don't know where she is. She's changed her name. So I don't know. And they're gone. Eventually I knew, but by that
Right.
time, Kenneth had been caught. So I ended up moving out of that building after my parents left, if I'm remembering right. My parents left, and I think they actually set me up in another building owned by the same people.
Mm-hmm.
This time it was in Santa Monica.
Mm-hmm.
And, I still want to find out about the owners of this building.
We think we know who the owners are, right? We're just not in a position where we want to say because we don't want to be sued because it's a very famous person. And we don't know what he knew.
The nice thing about you is that I had someone to talk to about all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And your energy and passion, everything about what you do is, a core. And you don't find that much in life. So, and I work in entertainment, so I see a lot of people who are passionate, but their passion is skewed. And so I reached out to you and I wanted to connect, and you had just done maybe 8 documentaries and you needed to talk to somebody. And it was like, oh my God.
Yeah, because the last one, it really affected me. And in fact, I think it was NBC called and asked if I'd do the promo. And I said, I can't. I just can't. And it really got to me. It was just and coming out of COVID, it was like my first contact with the real world. And boom, boom, boom. Bringing that back, it was many, many years ago. We're talking about December 13th, 1977.
See, here's the thing. He moved in August 8th, and I turned 17 August 24th. And then October was when he murdered Yolanda. So he was living there while he was killing. And I'd never put that together until recently when I started writing, because, to me, this is just what happened to me. This is just life. And I just didn't do the correlation, but because I need to, because I'm writing, it's fascinating to know that I actually moved out when I was 16.
So tell me about your book. Does your book encompass those experiences?
Yes, it does. And other experiences growing up in Hollywood, not the entertainment part of it, although will be part of it. But, I had a run-in with the Crips when I was 13. And that changed my life. And getting an opportunity to work in the music business at 15 and calling for the job from a payphone at a park in Hollywood, and getting the job and staying there till I was 25, that just set the pace. That got me out of my situation. I was so grateful.
What's the name of your book?
I don't know. There's a few titles. It keeps changing. And so the voice, I'm trying to settle on a voice. I think I have it. And it's basically how I'm telling it to you. It's an experience. I want it to be young adult. I want to share it with young adults from 12 to 18, 17. And I had to navigate pimps pushing me in the elevator, and getting pissed off that I didn't talk to them. And I remember one, and I said to him, he goes, "How come you never say anything?" And I said, out of respect, and I mind my own business. And I said that at 17, and he's like, then he walked away. But it settled it down, because we were in that confined space and his ego was bruised. So I had to deflate it quickly.
What were the other people like that lived in the building?
Well, I don't know because I kept to myself, but from the tenants who were not participating on the dark side of it with the prostitution and such, we all hid. Like there was a man being interviewed, and he said, "I never open my door when I hear the screaming. I hear it every night, and I never open my door." And when he heard it that night with Kimberly Martin, he didn't open his door. So the fact that my dad gave me that door alarm to set it off was perfect. So I could always set it off if somebody was fighting. And one time, Kenneth had a kitten on his balcony and it was crying. He just left it out there, and it could have fallen off. And I knocked on his door. I didn't want to, but I did. I didn't know who he was. He was my neighbor who abused his fiance. And I said, "Your kitten's going to fall off." And he said, "Oh, okay." He was so different. Like, he could switch it on and off. Even in the elevator when I first met him, my mother's saying he was a security guard. And I looked at him, and he was trying to emanate that. And he had gone around through the building and put business cards in everybody's door. And my dad had to take it all out and say, "You can't do that." And I'm not sure if it was for security or when he was pretending to be a therapist. Remember that spell?
Yeah. Yes. He had a lot of different careers that he pretended to be.
So I remember my dad saying, "You can't do that."
Well, I think you're very brave. To be able to tolerate that. A lot of it's just stress but what your body and your mind and your emotions must have gone through living in those circumstances had to be absolutely terrifying.
No, I didn't know any better. My life was like that. So at 19, a friend of mine from Hollywood High said, you should go to therapy. You always hold audience for everybody else. And I went to therapy, and the first session was, my parents are screwed up. I don't know what else to say. End of story. That's it. And my therapist once said, boy, when you do something, you go big. You just don't have little things happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
It just was the nature of the 70s. It was,
Very much so, yeah.
yeah, it attracted all the homicidal people, and the vibe was free for all, and the pimps walking around. My dad would drive me to Hollywood High and drop me off, and there'd be hookers there. And I remember at 13 riding my bike and falling off right in front of the Pussycat Theater on Santa Monica Boulevard. And this hooker, she was in her hot pants, just laughing her butt off, just like, laughing at me, having a good old time watching this kid fall off her bike. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, we were surrounded. And it was just how it was. I didn't know any better. I just prayed every night there had to be another way. There had to be another way. And I eventually found ways, and people found me, and I kept aiming higher. And it worked out.
And you did it.
I did.
To Santa Monica, to Beverly Hills. And
I didn't have to deal with Hollywood Boulevard. For the longest time, though, in my early 20s, I could never drive down Hollywood Boulevard. It was a trauma thing for me.
Even when I go back, I can't. We went to the Palladium for a play, and I was with friends, and we had dinner at Musso and Frank's, and I just really shut down. And they said I was no fun, but it's too heavy. There's too many memories.
It is. It is.
And it was a sexual exploitation capital of the world.
Yeah, and I was afraid I would end up there. But quite frankly, as I told my mother, I don't care. I don't care. I don't want to be here. I knew I had some control out there. I could hide, but here I just couldn't deal with it. And, I remember the Hare Krishnas. I shouldn't say this, but they were chanting at me. I was on Hollywood Boulevard when I was a teenager with my brother, and I just started crying. It was like, leave me alone. There's so much crazy. Leave me alone. Just get away from me. I just had it. The tambourines in my face, and I just like, oh, please.
And the Scientologists never got you.
Oh yeah. They did. They did. They tried. And if I tell you what I did then, that's another story. I actually confronted them, which the therapist at the time said that wasn't a good idea, but you're lucky they didn't come after you.
Right.
I mean, you would have liked my story.
But these were all features of Hollywood in the 70s.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it was quite the place. And I know when I ran around and pulled kids off the streets, I don't know how I did that without being afraid. I was never afraid.
I know. That's sort of how I felt. I felt like I was protected somehow, guided and protected. And I just knew that if I trusted in that, I would be okay, and just stuck to it. And my mother at one point, I think when my dad had left, she said to me she said, you're special. There's something about you, you're special, because I just knew I had to have something better. And I was in it, but not of it.
What happened to your brother?
Well, I had two brothers, and one died of AIDS, and then the other one died of Wegener's granulomatosis. So
were they young when they died?
Yeah, 30 and 50. And my mother had her massive heart attack and died when she was 51, 52. And so I'm the last man standing. And I finally went to go see my dad at the last 3 years of his life, because I had to understand what the hell was that, our life. And he explained to me he was adopted in an orphanage, Catholic Charities. He didn't know his mother. And it was the sorrow in his life, and it caused him to be depressed and drank, and it traveled to us, the children, and because of ancestry, I've been able to find out who his mother was and his father. And so, but, they're not alive, and I can't tell my dad or my brothers, oh, this is our grandmother.
Right.
But the whole point of this is that there is a way, and you have to believe it in your core, and don't believe everything around you. And always, when you're just so lost, I had the gumption after going mute in high school to come home and say to my mother, that's it. If I don't do this, I'm going to go so deep inside of myself, I won't come back.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew a girl in grade school who had been in a car accident, and she was mute. And I was the one on the playground that always looked after her, because she would just go out there and stand. And later on, I'd become that girl, and I had to fight for myself. So, and this is the one time my mother said to me, don't leave, I'll help you. And I feel like, and this is something I just got from my writing the other day, that she was, through me, trying to save herself. Like, she would never admit anything was wrong, because if she did, she would really fall apart. And when I needed her help, she usually denied everything. But this time I meant it. I said, I'm leaving. And she said, no, don't leave. I'll give you an apartment.
So you went mute before she gave you the apartment, and you live next to Kenneth Bianchi.
Yeah, I was already a mess before before that.
When did you figure out that Kenneth Bianchi was one of the Hillside Stranglers?
When they caught him, I had gotten a call from my mother saying they caught him, and it was Kenneth. He lived next door to you. And I was in shock. And we had no idea. And so the police, that's when the police, escalated their coming into the office and showing me more mugshots of Kelly Boyd. I guess by that time she had had her son that she had with Kenneth. They had moved to Washington.
The man arrested was 27-year-old Kenneth Bianchi. He had left the Glendale area of Los Angeles a few months earlier and come to live here with his son and girlfriend Kelly Boyd.
The kid I knew couldn't have ever hurt anybody or killed anybody.
What sort of person was he?
He was pretty thoughtful and real helpful with the baby, and even around the house he was real helpful. He just wasn't the kind of person that could have killed somebody.
So was your mother surprised to know it was Kenneth?
I don't think she knew it was him.
Well, what a tragedy, but at least we got to know each other, and I wish you all the success with your book.
Thank you. I'm very happy and pleased, and I'm trying to find a way to write it so that it helps people. I don't know how, but if I write it in the voice of hope, what do you suggest?
Well, I think writing in a voice of hope is good, but I think also from a young girl's point of view in terms of to explain what Hollywood was really like in the 70s, from a young girl who's not part of it, watching it all go around her. I mean, even going mute, living next door to Kenneth Bianchi, who's beating his wife. It's, and the pimps in the elevator. It had to be terrifying. I was never afraid of pimps on the street, but I couldn't imagine being in a closed space like an elevator with one of them.
I don't know. Somehow I just knew I'd be okay. I don't know what that was about.
And I think we spoke before, it was also a place where wealthy married men kept their mistresses. They'd give them apartments there.
Yes, and there were also men, they were furnished apartments. And they would come and go. So I would assume, whatever business deals the owners had, they would say, hey, by the way, I don't know, I shouldn't say that, but it's just something I vaguely remember it being, because these people would come and go, and they wouldn't be pimps, they'd be men with the huggers. So, and to me, it's just life. Doesn't everybody go through this?
No. No, they don't.
Just Hollywood. I mean, I had other great things going on in my life, but that, I don't know, that was just it.
Well, I wish you much success, and I really enjoy knowing you, and we'll get together and I'll see you again soon. Thank you for walking beside me and never giving up on America's children. If you want to support our mission, go to childrenofthenight.org and make a gift today. Please like and subscribe to our podcast. Many more episodes will follow.